If you've been waiting for an affordable graphics card that can give you a very good gaming experience, then you've no doubt heard all the rumors about the AMD RX 480 that everyone has been waiting on hearing about for a long time. And you guys have been told over and over, June 29th, June 29th. You can hear about it June 29th. That you all kept asking, how does it perform? Well guys, I've got the 8 gig model right here. I put it through a gambit of tests, and we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about this card, where it belongs, how I feel about it, and whether or not you should even consider it. Whether you're looking for a pump, reservoir, custom GPU block, or a complete loop in a box, AlphaCool's wide range of products can make your next water cooling adventure an easy one. Click the link in the description for more details. Now, quick disclaimer before we get into the benchmarks. I know we promised we'd get right into it, but I want you guys to understand what it is you're seeing here. I use the same tests I always do with all of my graphics cards, and I left Ashes of the Singularity out, not because I don't trust it. The devs have actually made changes on that, so the textures look the same regardless of the GPU load. It's the fact that I'm still having problems with the damn benchmark. For some reason, I'm getting very erratic results. Not with this card, but with some of the other cards that I was testing with it, so I'll come back to it. But the other thing too is I compared it to the Sapphire 380X Nitro Edition, which is a custom PCB 380X Nitro, which was the previous last gen 380 series card from AMD. And I compared it to the 970 SSC, which yes, is a more expensive card by more than $100 at the time of launch. I don't know what current pricing is this exact moment, but at the time of launch, it was more than $100 more than this card. So why did I do that? Well, when AMD was here, they actually came to my office here, spent time with me, and we went over the card so I could understand more about this card and why it exists and where it's designed to compete. And I flat out asked the question, who is this card aiming at? Who is this card trying to take down when it comes to performance? They said for pricing, it's aimed more at where the 960 launched, but for performance, it's got the 970 straight in its crosshairs. So, did it actually compete with the 970 at a much lesser price? Well, let's look at the benchmarks and find out.
Transition.
Now, obviously, when you look at those benchmarks, you can see that in most of the tests, the 970 edged this guy out by just a little bit. But I want to point something out. That 970 is an EVGA SSC, super clocked. So you've got the 970 reference, and then you've got the super clock, and then you've got the super clock, which actually has extra power phases and stuff in it. So it is not a standard 970. It's actually a custom PCB with more power and more frequency in it, whereas this is just a reference card. Now, why didn't I use just a standard 970 in the test? Easy, I don't have one. So I couldn't actually go back and retest it. But yeah, I digress. That's exactly how that 970 SSC performed when it launched versus how this is performing on the latest Crimson drivers, which obviously we had early access to. I did ask if the drivers were going to change between when I did my test and now, and when you guys can get them, and they said no. So that's it. That's the way you guys should be getting it, hopefully, as long as nothing goes wrong. But as you could see in some tests too with 1440p and even 4K, although this is not a 4K card, neither is the 970, neither is the 380X, I just want to see how they scaled under like 100% massive load where the graphics card is just buckling under the weight of all of those pixels, and it held its own very well, edging out the 970 in quite a few tests. And as you guys could see at 1080, it was like right there with the 970 trailing behind it just a little bit in some tests, but then just like, you know, completely pimp slapping in another test, which is very impressive considering the card has 8 gigabytes. It's a 1266 megahertz core, which is the highest core clock we've seen yet from anything to come out of AMD's camp, especially at this price point, and that it's running 8,000 megahertz effective memory. So the 4 gigabyte version is exactly the same. It's just cut down to 4 gigabytes, 256-bit memory bus, all of that. Now, it also has something that I thought was really neat because I opened up MSI Afterburner, and I wasn't expecting this. I was actually directed to go into the control center for Crimson, and then go into the global settings inside of where all the games are, and then you actually have overclock control within the driver. So it's a driver level overclocking available onto this card where you don't have to rely on third-party software to integrate for it like MSI Afterburner or any of the other software, I guess, that the other companies launch. You can actually do driver level overclocking with this, which was very nice to see. You can control things like fan curve. You can even control the P states. Now, P states are a lot like GPU boost, where it's going to, under certain load conditions, it's going to go to a certain frequency and certain voltage control. So you guys sometimes people ask me, I don't understand why it'll be in the middle of a test and then suddenly it'll drop down like a step of megahertz and then it will step up and then we'll step down. Why is it doing that? Well, guys, that's all P states. And this is something that is actually you're giving access to now with AMD, where you can actually control those P states and actually control the voltage for each one of those individually, which is giving you a much better overclocking experience, in my opinion. Now, this does all of this, guys, at 150 watt total TDP, single 6-pin connector, as well as 75 watts coming through the PCIe lane for 150 watt TDP. It is not a power draw whatsoever. Now, the card obviously got hot, but that's a blower style cooler, which you should expect from any blower style cooler with a very conservative fan curve. The way it ships out of the box, it would rather it be very quiet and get hot than being noisy and not as hot. So I turned up the power or the fan curve to see what would happen. Temperatures dropped down below 80°. Obviously, the decibels of it went very high. Another thing I tested for with this card was Coil Whine. And I'm pleased to announce that it was very low on Coil Whine. It was not intrusive. It was not like the Fury, where the Fury was just coil whining like crazy and screeching like a banshee. No, this was not noisy at all in an open air test bench when it comes to Coil Whine. One thing I want to point out though is they did remove the Dvid connector from the back of the card. So if you are using a monitor and you're using a DVI cable, you're going to have to either switch over to DisplayPort or get yourself a DisplayPort to DVI adapter or something like that, where you can then plug it into your card. They did say that the board partners are going to have access to solder points that are on the PCB, so they can add that back. So that's something you're going to have to look for when it comes to the custom board partner cards to see exactly what they're going to be throwing in. Now look at the size of that PCB, right? It looks like a pretty big card. Not pretty big, it's a pretty decent length, like average size card. But you can see here, the PCB is actually very short and it's very dense. It allowed them to go with a bigger heatsink on here, have the blower hang off the back and push air across the entire length of the card. But again, it's going to be up to the board partners on what type of cooling solutions they're going to come up with. Inevitably, you know, they're going to come up with multi-fan solutions that blow down on the card. So it's going to be interesting to see if it stays as short as this, or if they're going to be doing custom PCB options to make it longer so they can fit all those fans on there, or if they're just going to overhang the heatsink off the back of the card and do fans across it anyway, which we've seen them do in the past. Now, one thing that AMD also advertises with this card is that it is VR capable. Now, there's a lot of technology going on in graphics cards when it comes to VR, and I'll admit that I'm not prepared to talk about that today. That is going to be something that needs to happen on another video, and now that I have purchased my HTC Vive, I can actually do some VR testing, because graphics cards go under intense load when it comes to VR and the level of consistency they have to draw the frames. So if this was having any trouble, it would be very, very noticeable, and we will check that out, just unfortunately not today. But I think right now, if you're looking for a new graphics card, and you've only got about $200 to $240 to spend, the fact that you can, for $239, get an 8 gigabyte card, 8 gigahertz effective memory speed, 1266 megahertz, and guess what? I was able to actually overclock this to 1360. That's the highest core clock I've gotten on any AMD card I have ever touched in the history of me doing this channel. Yeah, this little guy just seems to keep surprising us. And that's the thing. Everybody hyped this card. Hyped. And I hate hype train, because often hype trains derail. But that didn't happen here. This card continued to impress me the more I played around with it. Doom 3, 1440p, high settings, 60 FPS, no problem whatsoever. I can't wait to see what the custom cards are going to hold from the board partners, and you know I'm going to review those, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Anyway, guys, it went on sale today, June 29th. RX 480. You guys tell me what you think. Did it hold up to the hype? You know there's a ton of videos out right now about this, tons of reviews. So go and check those out. Don't just take my word for it. Please do yourself a favor. Watch all the reviews, or at least 2 or 3 of them, to kind of get a better sampling of what's happening. We all have a little bit different test methodology. We all use a little bit different settings. And I think it's important for you to kind of try and develop a big picture based on what multiple people were saying, and not just Jay said, blah, 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 blah. But there you go, RX 480. I'm nicknaming this thing the Little Beast because it really is. Well, actually, it's not the first thing I've named the Little Beast, but I digress. So with all that said, this card sits pretty much all alone in the sub $300 range when it comes to graphics cards. When I say sub 300, we mean deep. 199, right, for 4 gig, 239 for 8 gig. That's a pretty big deal. And because it's sitting all alone right there in that price point, that is where most people shop. Is right around there. There's some statistic out there that's like 85% of people shop for graphics cards that are $250 or less. Right now, it's all by itself. So the ball is in NVIDIA's court to see how they're going to respond, because we all know that competition in the space is great for consumers. So we need some competition out there. And right now, AMD clearly wins this price point for now. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Tell me what you thought. Let me know if this card lived up to the hype or did it disappoint. Sound off in the comments, hit me up on Twitter, or come to Facebook. And if you don't want to do any of those things, well then hopefully I'll see you in the next video. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. It's a guaranteed way to know when I put up a video so that you can just like make fun of me. That's fun. That's a fun pastime. There's plenty of ammo waiting for you guys just to shoot. All right. I don't know what else I'm going to say, so I guess it's time to go. All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.